I was born twice. Once beneath the light of the Emperor's banners, and once beneath the black sun of the warp. The first birth was pain, the second was purpose. Yet, if you asked me which was worse, I could not tell you. Both were baptisms in blood. Before the rot, before the whispers, before the warbands and the sigils carved into flesh, I was a warrior of the Imperium. My name was once shouted by brothers in the halls of a legion that no longer exists. We called ourselves angels of death, the Emperor's chosen instruments. We believed our armor made us holy and our cause eternal. I can still feel that belief sometimes, like an itch beneath the scar of an old wound, an ache for a faith that betrayed me long before I betrayed it. It began during the long war of compliance. We had brought light to worlds that had never known it, purging those who resisted the imperial truth. Our fleets descended on cities like falling suns. Our bolters sang hymns of cleansing flame. We thought ourselves righteous, and perhaps, in those first centuries we were. But righteousness rots quickly in the hands of immortals. The first cracks in my faith came not from heresy, but from silence. The Emperor had left us to our Primarch's command, withdrawing to Terra to his great work. We bled across the galaxy while he built something we were never told to understand. I remember asking once, during a campaign on the dust world of Catheris, what purpose our slaughter truly served. My captain looked at me as if I'd uttered profanity. Purpose, he said, is not for us to question. The Emperor's will is the only purpose that matters. I believed him, even as I buried another city under its own bones. Then came the summons. We were recalled to our legion's homeworld, summoned by our Primarch himself. The message carried a tone none of us had heard before. Not command, not devotion, but urgency. When we arrived, the world was already changing. The air was thick with prayer, but not to the Emperor. New symbols adorned the walls of the citadel, painted in blood and ash. Our Primarch stood upon the dais, radiant and terrible, and spoke of liberation, of gods older than Terra, of a truth the Emperor had hidden from us. We should have seen it for what it was, the moment of fall. But when a god speaks, even angels forget their doubt. He told us the Emperor had lied, that the so-called golden throne was not a gift to mankind, but a prison for the divine spark within it, that the Emperor sought not to elevate humanity, but to enslave it under his light. And as he spoke, I felt something awaken in me, a hunger I hadn't known existed. It was not greed, nor hatred. It was the desperate need to believe in something real. The first war was not against Xenos or heretics. It was against our own brothers. We tore through loyalist lines, each kill a confession. I remember the first loyalist I slew, a sergeant of the Imperial Fists, his armor the color of sunlight. He fought like the Emperor himself watched him, even as I drove my chainblade through his chest. When he fell, he looked at me and whispered, "You don't have to do this." But I did, because I already had. The moment I doubted, I had fallen. We burned the skies of our homeworld, raising new banners under our Primarch's sigil. We were promised freedom from tyranny, a place among the true gods of the warp. And when the eye opened, when the heavens themselves tore apart, I saw those gods, not as visions, but as truth. The warp sang with their voices. They offered power without restraint, knowledge without limit. For the first time, I felt seen. It was beautiful. And it was the last beautiful thing I would ever see. The warp is not fire or shadow. It is reflection. It shows you what you desire, then teaches you to hate it. In the early days, we thought we had mastered it. We carved our victories into the fabric of reality, built cathedrals of flesh and faith. We called ourselves the Chosen, but the warp has no masters, only mirrors. And what it showed me was the truth of my soul. My hands had never been clean. I'd killed in the Emperor's name long before I'd ever whispered another's. The difference now was that I could see the blood. I could smell it, taste it, feel it steaming through my armor's joints. The gods gave me eyes to witness what I had always been, a murderer pretending to be holy. When Terra burned, I wasn't there. I watched from afar as our fleets tore at the walls of the cradle of mankind, As our Primarch rose and fell beneath the Emperor's light, the warp howled in joy and grief as father killed son and the galaxy cracked open. When the retreat came, I followed without question. We fled into the eye, dragging our sins behind us like chains that would never break. Time lost meaning there. A century became a heartbeat. A heartbeat became an age. The warp does not keep count. It devours. It feeds on emotion, on belief, on the residue of purpose. The gods whispered constantly, praise, promises, lies, until I could no longer tell which voice was my own. My armor fused to my skin. My brothers changed, some into beasts, others into things with too many eyes, too many mouths. Those who pleased their patrons became champions. Those who did not were remade into spawn, crawling reminders that the gods do not forgive failure. I tried to stay human, even as my flesh forgot how. I painted the Aquila on my pauldron in secret once, hoping to remember what it felt like to serve something pure. By the next morning, it had melted away, the metal reshaped into a twisted parody. A single wing curled around a bleeding eye. The warp mocked even my nostalgia. Sometimes I dream of that first loyalist I killed. In the dream, he never speaks. He just looks at me, as if waiting for me to realize something I haven't yet. Maybe he's waiting for me to admit that I wasn't betrayed. Maybe I betrayed myself. The gods gave me everything I asked for. Immortality, strength, freedom from fear. But what they never told me was that eternity leaves no room for forgiveness. Every victory becomes ash. Every prayer becomes noise. Every face I remember fades, until all that's left is the echo of a name that no longer belongs to me. I am the weapon that outlived its purpose. The child that killed its father to feel alive. I am the war that never ends because ending would mean admitting defeat. And if I could stand before the Emperor again, I would not beg for mercy. I would ask him one question. Did you ever forgive us for wanting more than your silence? The warp would laugh, of course. It always does. But maybe, just maybe, he would listen. There are moments when I forget what my hands looked like before the blood, not the blood of my enemies. That dries quickly, flakes away, becomes dust. But the blood of my brothers. The crimson that refuses to fade, that lives beneath the skin no matter how many centuries pass. You can scrub it, scrape it, pray over it. It will still be there. When the warp swallowed us, I thought I understood damnation. I thought it would be pain, fire, and punishment. But the truth was colder. The warp doesn't punish, it consumes. It takes what you are and stretches it until you no longer recognize the shape. It keeps what amuses it and discards what doesn't. The rest of you becomes echo. In the beginning, I still fought with discipline, still obeyed the tactics drilled into me back in the days of the Imperium. I maintained my armor, recited the catechisms I had once whispered before battle, even though they burned my tongue now. My brothers mocked me. They said I was clinging to ghosts. Maybe I was. We hunted the void for centuries, raiding the Imperium's outlying systems like carrion beasts. Entire worlds burned beneath our warships, not for conquest, but for hunger. The gods demanded offerings. Every massacre was a tithe. Every scream was currency. And I, still wearing the insignia of a forgotten legion, paid the price without question. The warp changed us differently. Some of my brothers grew monstrous. Horns splitting through helms, arms reshaped into claws, armor melding into flesh. Others became eerily perfect, their faces shining with the cruel beauty of demons. I was neither. My curse was slower, quieter. My reflection in my armor visor began to blur. My voice deepened until it no longer sounded human. I could no longer sleep because dreams had become corridors that led directly into the gaze of the gods. One of them called to me most, the one they named Khorne, the Lord of Skulls. His voice was not like speech. It was the rhythm of a heart that would not stop beating, echoing in the back of my skull. At first I resisted. I was no slave to a single god, I told myself. I served chaos undivided, free from chains. But freedom, I learned, is just another kind of chain. Invisible, but unbreakable. The longer I fought, the more I heard that pulse. In every battle, it grew louder, drowning out thought, drowning out memory. Rage became prayer. Blood became truth. I would lose myself in the rhythm of killing, in the beauty of annihilation. And when the battle ended, I would stand among the corpses and feel nothing. The blood never dried. It seeped into the cracks of my armor, down to the flesh beneath. When I removed the plating, I found new veins beneath the skin, darker than before, pulsing with a heat that was not mine. The gods were marking me, reshaping me, using me as their canvas. We called ourselves the Red Host then, a warband of exiles from half a dozen legions, united only by shared decay. Our leader was a monster named Varkalthor, a former champion of the World Eaters who had carved his way to demonhood and then somehow clawed his way back to mortality. He said he had seen Khorne's throne, had stood upon the skulls of angels and mortals alike. When he spoke, his words dripped like molten metal. "There is no loyalty left," he told us once, standing amid the remains of a hive city we'd butchered. Only survival. Only offering. The gods do not care for oaths, they care for spectacle. Give them that, and they will let you live a little longer. A little longer. That was the cruelest promise of all. Our raids became more frenzied. We descended on imperial convoys, on pilgrim fleets, on worlds that had forgotten our names. We tore open shrines, defiled relics, slaughtered priests until the air reeked of sanctity and iron. Sometimes I could feel the gaze of the gods upon us, a pressure, an unseen warmth crawling beneath the skin. The others exulted in it. I endured it. And then, on the dead world of Vera 9, something changed. We had ambushed a small garrison of the Astra Militarum, cornered them in the ruins of a cathedral once dedicated to the Emperor. It should have been nothing, another offering. But as I tore through their ranks, a young officer raised her last pistol and shouted something I hadn't heard in 10,000 years. "For Terra! For the Emperor!" Her voice was raw, terrified, but it struck me harder than any blade. The words burned. They cut through the centuries of noise. For a moment I saw her, not as prey but as a reflection. Her eyes filled with faith, her hands shaking yet steady enough to fire. The same conviction I once carried before I traded it for the gods' deceit. I killed her, of course. I had to. That was the ritual. But when I struck her down, her blood burned hotter than the rest. It hissed against my armor, etching faint lines into the ceramite. Lines that formed a symbol I hadn't seen since before the heresy. The Imperial Aquila. I stared at it for a long time after the battle. My brothers celebrated, chanting praises to Khorne, painting their blades with the blood of the fallen. I couldn't move. The mark glowed faintly, alive with a warmth that didn't belong in this place. That night, I dreamed. But it wasn't the usual chaos. No shrieking laughter, no demonic visions. I dreamed of Terra, of marble towers and golden light, of the Emperor's voice, not as command, but as forgiveness. When I woke, my armor was clean. The blood was gone. The mark was gone, but my hands still trembled. From that day forward, the killing felt different. I still fought, still slaughtered, still obeyed the call of the gods. But I felt hollow inside, like a weapon that had realized its target no longer mattered. Varkalthor noticed. He told me I was losing my edge, that I'd become soft. I told him the truth. "You mistake restraint for weakness," he laughed. "Restraint is what the weak call regret." A month later we fought again, this time against another warband, servants of Slaanesh who dared trespass on our claimed worlds. It was slaughter without purpose. Kalthor led the charge, his laughter echoing through the Vox. I followed out of habit, not faith. In the heat of battle, as blades clashed and screams filled the void, I saw one of the enemy champions, a creature of impossible beauty, flesh sculpted by the warp into something both divine and horrifying. She moved like a dream given form, her voice a melody that turned men into worshippers. She reached for me, not with hatred, but with longing. "Why do you fight?" she whispered through the din. "There is no victory left for you. Only the echo of what you were." I should have killed her. Instead, I hesitated. That was all it took. Kalthor saw. He tore through the line, howling, and struck her down himself. Then he turned his blade on me. "You are unworthy," he said. "You've forgotten the taste of devotion." I met his gaze, and for the first time in millennia, I smiled. Maybe that's the first thing I've remembered. We fought for hours. Each strike shook the earth. His strength was endless, his rage unholy. But rage burns fast, and when it's gone, it leaves nothing. I outlasted him. Not through skill, but through exhaustion. When I finally drove my chain blade through his chest, I looked into his eyes and saw no hate, only relief. The gods were silent that day. No whispers. No laughter. Only wind and ruin. I left the warband. I walked into the wasteland alone, my armor cracked and my faith torn open. The blood on my hands would never dry, but maybe, just maybe, I could stop adding to it. I didn't know where I was going. There were no stars in the warp, only reflections of what you feared most. I walked anyway, each step echoing in a world that no longer cared. And for the first time since I was reborn, I wondered if damnation could fade, Not through forgiveness, but through forgetting. The blood never dries. But sometimes, if you walk long enough, the stains start to look like scars. Time is not a river in the warp. It is a wound. It bleeds, it festers, and when it finally scabs over, it leaves behind something misshapen. A memory that doesn't belong to anyone. I have lived long enough to understand that years mean nothing here. What you think was a moment might have been a millennium. What you think was a lifetime could have been a single breath drawn in the dark. When I left the Red Host, I thought I was walking toward freedom. What I found instead was the graveyard of my own legion. The ship came to me like a phantom, vast, derelict, and silent. Its hull drifted through the warp without power, a broken relic of the great heresy. The runes carved across its sides glowed faintly with warp light, like veins in the corpse of a god. I recognized the markings. They were ours. The Mercy of Iron. A battle barge of my legion. Once glorious, once alive with the chant of 10,000 astartes. Now adrift, devoured by centuries of solitude. The sight of it pulled something from me I hadn't felt in ages. Longing. Against every instinct, I boarded. The docking bay was open to the void, but the ship still breathed. My boots hit the deck with a hollow clang, and the air inside carried the smell of oil, rust, and something far older. The musk of decay that only immortals can produce. My vox crackled once, a whisper of my own heartbeat echoing back to me. The corridors were a mausoleum. The walls still bore our heraldry, though it had melted into obscene mockeries of its former glory. The two-headed eagle had twisted into a spiral of fanged wings. Candles burned, though no one had lit them. The light was dim, but it moved like it was alive. I followed it deeper. The ship spoke in murmurs, not words, just fragments of thought pressed into metal. Sometimes I heard my own name whispered, though no one had spoken it in 10,000 years. Other times I heard laughter, distant and familiar, echoing down halls that no longer existed. The first body I found was kneeling before a shattered shrine. His armor was that of my legion, but corroded, fused into the deck. His hands were clasped in prayer, though his head was gone. A clean cut, a mercy perhaps. I could still feel the faint psychic echo of his last thought. Not fear, not pain. Regret. I walked for what might have been days. The ship had no beginning or end anymore. Corridors looped into themselves, decks folded into impossible angles. It was a labyrinth, and I was the ghost walking through it. Then, in the heart of the vessel, I found them. Hundreds of them. My brothers, or what was left of them. Their armor bore our colors, though the hues had shifted into darker tones, more crimson than red, more shadow than metal. They stood in a great circle around the ship's command throne, motionless. At first I thought they were statues. Then I saw the slow rise and fall of their chests. They were alive. A voice called from the throne, soft and cracked with age. You finally came back. I froze. The figure that rose from the seat was immense, taller than I remembered any astartes being. His armor was a cathedral of fused relics, his helm crowned with a halo of thorns that burned with dying embers. When he removed it, I recognized the face beneath, or what was left of it. It was Captain Arthas Venn, my commander during the siege of Calix Prime, before the heresy. The man who had once taught me how to fight with faith, not fury. You're alive, I said. He smiled faintly. Alive, perhaps? Or maybe I just haven't stopped yet. I stepped closer. How long has it been? He shook his head. Long enough for the gods to forget us. Long enough for the Imperium to call us myths. What happened here? Arthas gestured to the circle of motionless marines. They refused to serve. When the Legion fell to chaos, I tried to hold them together. Tried to keep them from becoming what the gods wanted. But the warp doesn't tolerate restraint. One by one they changed. Some begged for death. Some became something else. He looked around, eyes hollow. So I did what I had to do. I made them sleep. I locked their minds away before the warp could claim them. The ship groaned around us, as if agreeing with him. I realized then that the Mercy of Iron wasn't just drifting. It was dreaming. You've been here ever since? I asked. I can't leave, he said. This ship is my punishment. Every time I try to steer it out of the warp, it brings me back to the beginning. To the moment I failed them. Failed them how? He looked at me with the sadness only an immortal can carry. I believe the Emperor could forgive us. He reached out, and I saw the scars where purity seals once hung. Do you still believe, brother? The question cut deeper than any blade. I don't know, I said. I want to, but I don't know if belief means anything anymore. Arthas nodded. That's why you're still damned. The ones who stop asking are the ones who become monsters. He motioned to the slumbering figures. I've kept their faith asleep, to spare them the pain of remembering. but the ship is dying. When its core collapses, they'll wake again, and they'll be hungry. I understood what he was asking before he said it. End it, he whispered. And the Legion that time forgot. The words hung heavy in the air. I hesitated. These were my brothers, my blood. To kill them was to erase the last piece of what I had been, but to leave them was worse. The warp would feed on them until nothing remained but madness. So I raised my bolter. Arthas smiled. You were always the one who could do what must be done. I fired. The shot echoed through the ship like thunder. One by one, I moved through the chamber, granting mercy to each still figure. No screams, no struggle, just silence. The kind of silence that feels holy. When it was done, I turned to Arthas. He was still standing, watching me with eyes that glowed faintly red. Thank you, he said. Now go. Don't let this place remember you. I lowered my weapon. Come with me. He shook his head. I can't. Someone has to steer the ship into the dark. The floor beneath us began to tremble. The walls bled light. The mercy of iron was tearing itself apart. I ran. Behind me, I heard Arthas's voice one last time. Tell them we tried to stay human. When I emerged into the void, my armor was cracked. My lungs filled with the dust of 1,000 ghosts. The ship folded into itself and vanished, leaving behind nothing but a faint shimmer. A scar in the warp that would never heal. For a long time, I drifted in silence, surrounded by the echoes of what I had done. My brothers were gone. My captain was gone. My Legion was gone. All that remained was me. The Legion that time forgot had finally found peace by becoming memory. And I, the last of them, began to understand that eternity isn't survival. It's endurance, the cruelest gift of all. The warp does not forget. It waits, it watches, it hungers. I once believed the gods were voices that came from beyond. Beings older and greater than the galaxy, whispering their will into mortal minds. But that was a lie. The gods don't come from the outside. They're born inside us. They are every unspoken thought, every hidden desire, every scream swallowed by duty. When enough of those accumulate in the void, the warp gives them form. It makes the nightmare flesh. After the mercy of iron was gone, I drifted for what might have been centuries. My vessel, little more than a gutted raider, limped through the eye like a blind animal. The warp around me burned in colors no mortal mind could name. Sometimes it was crimson oceans that bled into golden storms. Other times it was silence, a darkness so complete it felt like being buried alive. I should have died 1,000 times over. But death, like everything else, had forgotten me. I began to hear them again. The gods. Not as words this time, but as presence. Each one was a tide, pulling at what little was left of me. The first to speak was the Lord of Rage. His voice wasn't a whisper. It was a drumbeat that shook the marrow. You've killed, but not enough. You've bled, but not for me. His laughter was thunder, his approval a storm. For days, or years, the sound haunted me, echoing through my armor until I could no longer tell if it was memory or heartbeat. Then came the one of decay, the patient god. He didn't speak in words at all. His voice was wrought. It crept into the corners of my thoughts like mold, soft and steady, promising rest. Lay down your weapon, it said without saying. You've earned the peace of ruin. I could almost see it, a garden of rust and bone, where nothing ever changed because everything had already ended. It was tempting, that stillness. But the third came laughing, shimmering like oil over water. The god of pleasure. His tone was beautiful, terrible, gentle. You've spent too long hating yourself, he crooned. You could love again, if you stopped pretending you were ever pure. Every word carried scent, color, sensation. I could feel the air on my skin, the taste of memory on my tongue. It wasn't lust, it was longing, the kind that hurts. And finally the fourth, the one that doesn't speak in sound or warmth, the one of change. His words arrived as thought itself, reshaping the logic of my mind. You resist because you still believe choice matters, but choice is the greatest illusion of all. They circled me for centuries, these gods of the warp. They offered everything I had once wanted, purpose, peace, pleasure, power. And yet, in their gifts, I saw hunger. The same hunger that had driven me across 1,000 battlefields, the same hunger that made the Emperor raise us from humanity and call it ascension. They were mirrors, nothing more, reflections of the same wound that birthed the Imperium itself. Still, I listened, because in the silence of eternity, even damnation sounds like company. Eventually, I found a world, or maybe it found me. A black orb drifting at the edge of the eye, its surface veiled by crimson storms. The sensors called it Araxis. The warp called it something older. A shrine world swallowed during the heresy. where mortals and demons had once warred for a century straight before both forgot why. I landed in what had once been a city. The ruins stretched for miles. Towers of melted glass, statues half dissolved into bone. The wind howled through the streets like a living thing. I walked for days and saw no movement, no life, but I felt watched. Every shadow shifted slightly when I turned. Every breath I took felt borrowed. At the city's heart stood a temple. It wasn't built for any of the gods I knew. Its architecture was wrong, human in proportion, but alien in geometry. The symbols carved into its walls shimmered, rearranging themselves when I tried to read them. Yet beneath the strangeness, I recognized something. The Imperial Aquila, split apart, one wing ascending, the other descending. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of incense and rust. Candles still burned, though they hadn't been touched in millennia. And in the center, chained to a pillar of black stone, was a figure. He was Astartes once. I could see it in his build, his armor, but the armor had fused into his flesh. His skin was carved with sigils that pulsed faintly with warp energy. His eyes opened when I entered, glowing like dying stars. "You shouldn't have come here," he said. His voice was cracked, soft, ancient. "Who are you?" He laughed, though there was no joy in it. "No one remembers. I was a champion once. They said I'd earn eternity. They were right." I circled him slowly. "Which god do you serve?" "All of them," he said. "None of them. It doesn't matter. They all feed from the same source." "What source?" He looked at me, and in that gaze I saw my own reflection. Hollow. Endless. "Us," he said simply. "They are what we make of them. Every prayer, every scream, every act of devotion builds their thrones higher. They don't rule us. We build them. And we can never stop, because worship is what we are." The realization hit like a blade through the chest. I had spent 10,000 years serving gods that were only the echo of my own failure. I wanted to deny it, to scream, to tear him apart for saying it aloud. But he just smiled, as if he'd seen that reaction countless times before. "You'll understand soon," he said, "when they notice you again." "Why would they?" I asked. "I've given them nothing for centuries." He tilted his head. "Because you've denied them. That's their favorite flavor." Before I could speak, the ground shook. The chains around him snapped, not from force, but from will. The air thickened with heat. The warp bled through the cracks in reality, painting the walls in living color. He rose, slowly, painfully, his form shifting between flesh and fire. "You brought them with you," he said. "They never let us wander too far," the walls screamed. The sky above the temple split open, and 4 shadows descended. Indistinct but immense, their presence pressing against my mind until it felt like it would burst. I saw visions, worlds aflame, seas of bones, endless parades of suffering and ecstasy and mutation. And in all of it, one truth burned clear. They weren't reaching for him. They were reaching for me. The chained champion's body collapsed into dust. His laughter lingered, echoing through the temple as the gods whispered together. I could hear them fighting for me, each promising deliverance through ruin. "Serve me, and your rage will carve empires. Kneel, and your decay will become peace. Submit, and your pleasure will eclipse pain. Believe, and you will know truth." For a long time I stood frozen. The air rippled with power, reality bending under their hunger. All I had to do was choose. Instead, I knelt. Not to them, but to the silence between their voices. "I have served you all," I said quietly. "And in serving you, I learned this. You are nothing without us." For a heartbeat, the universe stopped. The air went still. And then my laughter. Endless, echoing laughter that sounded like stars dying. They didn't strike me down. They didn't speak again. They simply withdrew, leaving me in the ruins, trembling, alive. The gods do not forgive rebellion, but sometimes they admire it. When I left Araxis, the sky above me bled gold instead of red. The ship's instruments flickered, showing stars where there had been none before. Perhaps I had stepped closer to reality, or perhaps I had just wandered deeper into the lie. Either way, I understood now. The gods don't hunger for blood or faith. They hunger for meaning. And beings like me are the only ones foolish enough to keep feeding them. I thought I had forgotten what it meant to dream. But when you've lived long enough, even forgetting becomes a kind of memory. The mind refuses the void. It fills it, like water filling cracks in broken stone. After Araxis, the dreams returned, though they were no longer gifts of the warp. They came from somewhere deeper, somewhere mine. I dreamed of Terra. Not as it is now. Not as the corpse world of shrines and fire. But as it was when I first swore my oath. The air had the scent of ozone and incense. The sky burned with gold. I stood in the training yards of the palace, young, pure, armored in pride instead of corruption. My Primarch's voice thundered through the air, full of command and faith. We believed the Emperor watched us personally. We believed our deaths would mean something. When I awoke, my armor was wet with oil and blood. The ship's systems had malfunctioned again, leaking through the walls like the vessel itself was bleeding. I wiped my hands across the console and saw the stains glow faintly, alive with red light. The warp never truly leaves its mark behind. I was orbiting a planet, a civilized one. The scanners called it Naramis, a world of the Imperium, still loyal to the Emperor. The machine spirit of the ship hissed warnings at me, automated liturgies of excommunication, but I shut them off. I had not seen a human world in 10,000 years. I needed to remember what it looked like. I descended through the cloud layer under false identity beacons stolen long ago. The ship's stealth systems were half dead, but it was enough. I landed in the wastelands beyond the cities, where the manufactorums stretched like black forests of iron and smoke. The first thing I noticed was the sound, not of war, not of prayer, but of labor. Endless, mechanical, obedient, the kind of noise that fills the air until it becomes background, the kind that reminds you the Imperium doesn't need gods to be cruel. I hid my armor beneath tattered robes and walked among them. The humans didn't look up. They never do. They moved in lines, feeding the forges, hauling slag, breathing poison. Their skin was pale, their eyes dim. Servitors worked beside them. Men and machines fused together until they were indistinguishable. For a moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in millennia. Pity. Not for them, but for myself. Because once, I'd killed these people to save them. Once, I believed their suffering was necessary. I was their angel, their protector. Now, I was the nightmare they no longer had the luxury to fear. I walked for hours through the manufactorum districts until I reached the outer settlements. Here, the air was thinner, the people freer. They traded scraps, shared water, and told stories to their children about the angels of the Emperor. Not the ones who came from the stars to burn cities, but the ones who watched unseen, keeping the darkness at bay. It almost broke me, because I knew I was one of those angels, and I knew what the darkness really looked like. That night, I found shelter in an abandoned chapel. Its walls were cracked, its icons faded, but the Aquila still hung above the altar, wings outstretched in silent defiance. I lit a candle, an old habit, and sat beneath it. The flame flickered weakly in the gloom, casting shapes that danced across the walls. Then I heard it, the shuffle of small feet. I turned, and a child stood in the doorway, clutching a piece of bread. Her face was smudged with soot, her eyes wide but unafraid. "You're one of them," she said. The words froze me. "One of who?" "The angels," she whispered. "The ones who guard the Emperor's dreams." For a long moment I said nothing. Then I nodded. Once, she stepped closer. "Do you still guard him?" I looked at the Aquila above us, cracked, dark, imperfect, and felt something stir in the hollow where faith used to live. "Maybe," I said softly. "Maybe I guard what's left of him," she smiled. "Then he's not gone. Children are cruel in their innocence. They make you remember." Before I could speak again, a siren wailed in the distance. Patrols. The ecclesiarchy still hunted heresy, and the sight of an unregistered wanderer in the wastes would draw attention. The girl fled, her candlelight trailing into the night. I stayed behind and waited for the soldiers. When they entered, I saw the same faces I'd seen 1,000 times before. Humans wearing armor designed to imitate ours, holding weapons built from fragments of our legend. The leader approached, his voice muffled by his rebreather. "You don't belong here." I smiled beneath my hood. "No one does." They didn't understand. They never do. When they tried to search me, one of them brushed against my armor beneath the robe. The reaction was immediate. He felt the unnatural cold, the weight of metal fused with flesh. His eyes went wide. "Heretic," he breathed. "I didn't kill them. Not this time." I broke their weapons and fled into the night. The planet's alarms filled the air, echoing like the heartbeat of a god that no longer cared. By dawn, I was already gone. Back aboard my ship, I watched the sunrise over Naramis from orbit. The manufactorums glowed like dying stars. The people below would never know how close they had come to seeing what their faith truly looked like. Maybe that was mercy. The gods of chaos whispered again, faintly. "You still care for them," one voice purred. "How quaint," another sharper, colder. "You cannot return. The flesh remembers what the soul has denied." And they were right. My body still bore the warp's mark. My voice still carried its echo. Even the light of an untainted sun made my skin crawl. I had wanted to remember humanity, but the truth was worse. I had never stopped being human. I had just outlived the luxury of calling it hope. As the planet faded behind me, I realized that memory was not redemption. It was rot, the slow decay of what once had meaning. Every time I reached for the past, it crumbled in my grasp like ash. Still, I couldn't let go of the girl's words. Then he's not gone. If faith was a lie, it was the most beautiful one ever told. And if he was truly gone, then why did the stars still tremble when his name was whispered? Why did his light still pierce the warp on nights when all else was dark? The gods had told me they were born from us, but maybe he was too. Maybe that was the Emperor's final secret. That he was just the part of humanity that refused to stop believing. And if that was true, then perhaps even monsters like me were part of his dream. The flesh remembers. It remembers the oaths, the faith, the sound of brothers laughing before the war. It remembers the weight of armor that once meant honor, not shame. And sometimes, in the quiet between the screams of the warp, it remembers what it felt like to be forgiven. Eternity is not the gift they promise you. It is a coffin without walls, a death that never ends. You don't sleep because there are no dreams left. You don't die because death is mercy, and mercy is something long forgotten. You simply exist, stretched across the centuries like a shadow that can no longer find the body that cast it. The warp has no clocks, no suns, no calendars. But I feel time in my bones, the slow, grinding erosion of purpose. My armor has become part of me, its plates fused into the scarred tissue of my body. I no longer remove it. I no longer know if I could. Each movement creaks, each breath feels like inhaling dust. The ship moves through the void on its own, guided by spirits older and more faithful than I. I have stopped counting the years, but sometimes I still talk aloud to no one. Maybe to the Emperor, maybe to the gods, maybe just to keep the sound of my voice from fading. The silence of immortality is what truly kills you. I remember once hearing a mortal priest say that the Emperor watches over mankind eternally, bound to his golden throne, his sacrifice keeping the Astronomicon alight. I used to believe that was noble, a god's burden for a mortal race. Now I see it for what it is, imprisonment. The Emperor is as trapped as I am, perhaps more so. And so I drift in the dark between stars, surrounded by the ghosts of my brothers. The warp whispers to me as it always does, offering temptation dressed as revelation. You could be more, it hisses. You could ascend. That word is the sweetest lie of them all. I've seen what ascension means. The demon princes, their bodies warped into nightmares of glory and torment, their minds dissolving into the hungering vastness of the gods. They call it transcendence, but it's just consumption. They become food for the entities they worship. I would rather rot in my armor for eternity than be devoured in the name of perfection. The gods don't understand boredom. They only understand appetite. That's what makes immortality unbearable. Not pain, not isolation, but monotony. When you've fought every war, seen every form of death, heard every prayer twist into blasphemy, there's nothing left but the echo of what you used to believe in. Once I tried to sleep. I entered stasis, sealed in my sarcophagus of metal and memory, hoping the warp would forget me. But even frozen, the dreams came. I saw the faces of the brothers I'd killed. Arthas Ven, kneeling before the mercy of iron, Varkalthor's broken smile as he fell. The nameless officer on Varen 9, her blood etching the Aquila into my armor. They spoke no words, but their silence was worse. It asked questions I couldn't answer. When I awoke, centuries had passed. Or perhaps only seconds. The stars had shifted. My ship drifted through a region of the warp I didn't recognize. It was quiet, too quiet. No daemons, no storms, no laughter. Just stillness. Then I saw it. A planet, floating in the void without orbit or sun. Its surface was white, not snow, not stone, but bone. A world built from the remains of the dead. I don't know what compelled me to land, but I did. Perhaps curiosity. Perhaps punishment. The air was cold, dry, lifeless. The ground crunched beneath my boots with the sound of breaking skulls. There were no structures, no ruins. Just an endless plain of skeletal fragments stretching into the horizon. I walked for days, though time meant nothing here. And then, in the center of that vast wasteland, I found a throne. It was made of bones, human, xenos, even astartes, fused together by some ancient power. Upon it sat a figure in armor like mine, but golden, radiant even in death. His head was bowed, his gauntlets resting on the pommel of a sword thrust into the earth. For a moment, I thought it was him. The Emperor. The illusion was perfect. The aura of divinity, the weight of impossible authority. But as I drew closer, the illusion cracked. The armor was empty. No body, no soul. Just the echo of worship left behind. I stood before that hollow throne for a long time, staring at what we had all died for, the symbol, the lie, the dream, and I understood. Immortality wasn't the Emperor's gift to mankind. It was his curse upon us. The warp fed on emotion, yes, but it also fed on belief. And we had believed so hard, fought so long, that even when he died, his idea refused to fade. That idea became its own god, its own prison. The Emperor's light wasn't life. It was inertia, the refusal to die. I fell to my knees. I wanted to pray, but I didn't know to whom. There were no gods here. Only ghosts. Only the sound of the wind whispering through skulls. Was it worth it? I asked the empty armor. All of it? The wind didn't answer, but the bones shifted, clattering together like teeth. And in that sound, I thought I heard laughter. Maybe the gods had followed me here after all. I left the throne behind. As I walked, I looked at my hands, at the armor fused into the flesh. The fingers were thicker now, the joints unnatural. My reflection in the visor was warped, bestial. My eyes burned faintly red even without the warp's light. The transformation was slow, patient, but unstoppable. Immortality reshapes you. Not all at once, but one thought at a time. You start by losing sleep, then memory, then fear. Eventually, you stop recognizing your own reflection. You become the thing that lives after the man is gone. But as I left that world of bone, I realized something. Maybe that was the Emperor's secret. Maybe immortality was his lesson, not his punishment. He gave us eternity so that we would finally understand how small we were. How every act of faith, every war, every death, all of it, would fade into dust given enough time. And yet, the fact that we keep fighting, that might be the only proof that we still matter. The ship's systems flared back to life as I re-entered orbit. The machine spirit whispered softly, its binary hymns old and cracked. I felt the warp stir again, its currents pulling me forward. Not toward salvation, not toward damnation, but simply onward. Immortality is weight, yes, but it's also momentum. The galaxy keeps spinning, dragging even the dead along with it, and so do I. Perhaps one day I'll find an end, or perhaps I already have, and this is just the echo that lingers after. Either way, I walk, I remember, I endure, because that's what we were made for. Not victory, not glory, endurance, and the weight of eternity presses down upon me still. Heavy, infinite, and utterly deserved. There are wars that end because one side wins, and there are wars that end because there's no one left to fight. But the wars of the warp, the wars of chaos, never end. They devour themselves, feeding on the bones of victory, growing fat on the ashes of their own triumphs. Every battle I've fought for the gods has been the same story written in different blood. Every victory has only ever been the first step toward another wound. I found my way back into war as easily as a drunk finds his way back into the bottle. It started with a signal. A faint distress call, imperial in origin, pulsing across the void. My ship caught it in the dark. The voice on the Vox was soft, trembling, desperate. This is the Benedictus Angelus. We are under attack. Coordinates attached. May the Emperor have mercy. Mercy. Even after all this time, humanity still prayed for it. And I, a creature damned beyond measure, still felt something stir when I heard that word. Maybe pity. Maybe curiosity. Maybe the last echo of who I used to be. When I arrived, the truth was obvious. The distress call wasn't from survivors. It was bait. The Benedictus Angelus hung in the void like a carcass, its hull cracked open and bleeding atmosphere. Around it drifted ships painted in the colors of old heresies, crimson, brass, violet, gold. I recognized them immediately. World Eaters, Emperor's children, 1,000 sons, and among them, fragments of other legions too broken to name, scavengers wearing the memories of what they once were. 1,000 years of hatred welded into a single fleet, united by greed and nothing else. As my vessel slipped into their formation, I caught their chatter across the Voxnet. Endless threats, hymns, boasts, and laughter. Each warband claimed dominion over the others. Each captain promised death to anyone who questioned his god's supremacy. They were supposed to be allies. Instead, they circled one another like predators, too proud to admit hunger, too desperate to stop feeding. I should have turned back, but something in me wanted to see how far the rot had gone. So I joined them. The fleet gathered under a single warlord, a demon prince named Kadrax the Unbroken, a former Iron Warrior who had ascended to immortality by slaughtering his own legion's warsmiths. His voice carried across every channel, deep and resonant, shaking the air like thunder. "Brothers," he said, "the Imperium festers while we bicker. It is time to remind the galaxy who its true masters are. We will burn this sector and take what is owed to us." He spoke of unity, But unity in the Eye of Terror is a word without meaning. Each warband followed him only until it was convenient. Each plotted against the other the moment he finished speaking. Our first target was a fortress world, an outpost guarding a warp route near the Segmentum Obscurus. The planet's defenses were formidable, its orbital guns burning bright as we descended. But against a fleet like ours, resistance was a formality. We fell upon them like vultures. The battle lasted 3 days. When it was done, the sky was red with smoke, the seas black with oil and blood. Cities burned, temples collapsed. The Imperium's banners fell into the fire, but victory did not bring silence. It never does. The World Eaters turned on the Emperor's children, accusing them of cowardice. The children mocked the others' brutality, claiming the gods favored refinement over rage. The Thousand Suns stood apart, murmuring to their unseen familiars. The Iron Warriors began fortifying the ruins, declaring the planet their new stronghold. By the second night, they were killing each other. The gods watched, delighted. I could feel their laughter vibrating through the warp. A deep, endless sound. The laughter of beings who know their children will never grow wise enough to escape them. I stood among the chaos, unmoving. I had fought for glory once, then for survival, then for meaning. Now I fought only because there was nothing else to do, and even that felt like too much. Kdrax found me at dawn, standing over the corpses of a dozen warriors from rival legions. His armor shimmered with the essence of the warp, his wings spread wide, his eyes burning like coals. "You do not kneel," he said. "No. You think yourself free? I think I am tired." He laughed, a deep hollow sound that made the ground tremble. "Then you are closer to freedom than any of them. The gods cannot break what no longer seeks to rise." He offered me a place beside him, a position of command. Power, he promised. Recognition. The chance to rebuild our legion under his banner. I looked into his burning eyes and saw what he truly was. Not a god, not even a leader, but another slave who had learned to love his chains. "I've built enough empires," I said. "They always collapse under the weight of the same hunger." His smile faded. "Then die." We fought beneath a burning sky. His strength was endless, his rage divine. But rage is predictable. Every blow he struck shook the ground, but every strike left him open. I moved through the storm like a ghost, my blade carving arcs of silver fire. He laughed even as I cut him, calling down his gods to witness his glory. When he fell, he didn't scream. He looked at me almost sadly, as if he'd known this end from the start. "You will take my place," he said. "You all do, eventually." I left him there, his body already dissolving into the warp. Around me, the battlefield was still. The surviving warbands had turned away, too exhausted or too afraid to continue. The gods had lost interest. The laughter faded. I stood alone in a world built from ashes and regret, and realized the truth Kdrax had known all along. Chaos doesn't need enemies. It devours itself. The gods don't need to punish us. We do it for them. By dusk, I'd left the planet behind. My ship drifted through the ruins of the fleet. Broken hulls, shattered relics, drifting corpses glowing faintly with warp fire. I sent no message, made no vow, sought no guidance. The war was over, but the hunger remained. In the silence that followed, I thought of my brothers. The ones who had fallen, the ones I had killed, the ones still fighting wars that would never end. Perhaps this was our purpose. Not conquest, not damnation, but the endless rehearsal of the same mistake. The war devours itself because it was born from us, because even gods cannot starve forever. And as I drifted away from that burning world, I whispered into the void. Not a prayer, not a curse, just a truth. We are the wound that will never close. The stars are not silent. They murmur in the void, soft and ceaseless, like the breath of something vast that never sleeps. The Imperium once said that the stars were the Emperor's eyes, watching over his children across the endless dark. The gods of the warp say they are the sparks of his dying fire, but I know what they truly are. They are memories. Each one burns with the echo of something that once mattered. A war, a promise, a prayer whispered too loudly into the void. And like all memories, they fade. Some flicker out quietly, others scream as they die. After the war of Kdrax's fleet, I drifted again. No direction, no allegiance, no purpose. My ship, Vigil of Damnation, had survived only because its machine spirit was too stubborn to die. It hummed to itself in binary prayers, repairing its wounds with a devotion I could no longer understand. I envied it, that simplicity, the clarity of function. It knew what it was for. I didn't. The warp was unusually still. The gods had grown distant, their whispers muted, their laughter faint. Even damnation seemed tired. It was during this silence that I began hearing the stars. At first, I thought it was madness, the echo of too many battles, too many centuries alone. But the longer I listened, the more I realized it wasn't inside my head. It was coming from outside. The first voice I heard was faint, like static through a dying vox. "You remember," it said. The tone was neither male nor female, human nor demon. It was familiar. "Who are you?" I asked the empty void. Silence. Then, a reflection. The words lingered, fading like a dying pulse. I tried to trace the signal, but it came from nowhere, or everywhere. Days passed, or years. The voice returned again and again, each time from a different direction. It never commanded. It never threatened. It just spoke. "You fought for gods who cannot see you. You believed in an emperor who cannot die. And still you search for meaning." Why? I had no answer. Not one that mattered. I thought it might be a demon, another trick of the warp. But the longer I listened, the less certain I became. Demons don't ask questions. They feed. This voice felt curious, patient, almost human. Eventually I gave up trying to ignore it. "What are you?" I whispered one night, watching the stars turn. "Something that remembers," it said. "Something you left behind." My blood ran cold. "Memory?" "No," it replied softly. "Possibility." The stars outside flickered, forming faint shapes, patterns I half recognized. Maps, battlefields, faces. For a moment, I saw Terra, its golden towers glimmering in impossible detail, untouched by decay. Then the vision shifted, and I saw the same world burning. And then another, not Terra but something new, brighter, clean. "Do you understand now?" the voice asked. I didn't, but I wanted to. It began to guide me, not through commands, but through suggestion. Course corrections whispered in dreams, coordinates traced in the frost that formed on my ship's glass. I followed because I had nothing else left to follow. Weeks later, or centuries, who can tell, I reached a place the maps did not name, a void unlike any I had seen before. The warp was quiet here. No storms, no laughter, no screams. Just stillness. It felt wrong. The gods never tolerated silence. At the center of this emptiness floated a structure. Massive, ancient, and beautiful. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't a planet. It was both and neither. A cathedral built into the bones of a moon, its surface shimmering with light that wasn't light at all. The glow of thought, of consciousness. My scanners failed. My engines died. The vigil drifted toward it as if drawn by gravity that wasn't physical. As I approached, I felt something in my mind unlock. A memory I didn't remember having. The voice spoke again. Closer now. "You've come home." The docking bays opened before me, vast enough to swallow battle barges whole. I stepped out into silence. No guards, no priests. Just empty halls lined with statues. Thousands of them. Astartes in every shape and color, each bearing a different insignia. Some loyalist, some traitor, some long forgotten. At the far end of the hall, beneath a dome of glass that looked out upon the stars, stood a single figure. He wore no armor. His body was wrapped in robes of dark crimson, his face hidden behind a mask of gold. When he turned, I felt the air itself bend around him. Not from power, but from memory. "I know you," I said before I could stop myself. He tilted his head. "We all know each other here. That is the curse of eternity. Who are you?" He stepped closer, and I saw his eyes through the mask, ancient, sorrowful, and unmistakably human. "A dream of what you could have been," he said. "A fragment of what was lost when your kind turned away from him. The Emperor," he nodded, "or whatever remains of him. Call it the Astronomicon. Call it memory. Call it the collective ache of all mankind. It doesn't matter. I am what's left of his light, and you are what's left of his shadow." I wanted to speak, but the words caught in my throat. "You are not the first," he continued. "Others have come here. Champions, monsters, repentance. They all sought the same thing, an end to the hunger. But the gods do not allow endings. So I offer them something else." "What?" "Silence." He gestured to the statues. "Each of these was once a soul who remembered what it meant to regret. They came here and they listened, and when they were ready, they let go." The realization struck me like a bolt shell. "They're not statues," he shook his head. "No, they're echoes. The memory of those who refuse to keep feeding the gods. You can join them, if you wish. The choice is yours." Choice. Such a small word. Such a dangerous one. I looked up at the stars beyond the glass dome. Millions of them, whispering softly. I could hear their voices now, clearer than ever. They weren't prayers. They weren't screams. They were remembrances. Every voice that had ever whispered no into the endless hunger of the warp. For the first time in 10,000 years, I felt something close to peace. But peace is not freedom. It's just another kind of forgetting. I can't, I said finally. Not yet. The figure nodded, as if he'd expected it. Then go. The stars will wait. They always do. As I turned to leave, he called out to me one last time. When you tire of eternity, remember where the silence lives. Back aboard my ship, I looked once more at that cathedral of light. Then I watched it fade into the void until nothing remained but stars. They still whisper to me now, even as I drift. Not commands, not temptations. Just quiet reminders that even in the warp, even in damnation, something still remembers what it means to hope. The gods may hunger forever, but the stars remember the ones who stopped feeding them, and perhaps one day, I will join them. It began as a flicker in the dark, a light where there should have been none, soft, golden, pulsing faintly through the static of the warp. At first, I thought it was another hallucination, one of the many gifts the gods leave behind when they grow bored of torment, but this light didn't mock. It didn't whisper. It called. For centuries, I had wandered through silence. The voices of the gods had grown distant, their hunger dulled by disinterest. They had other wars to watch, other slaves to shape. I was a relic to them, a ruined tool, forgotten in the dark. And yet, when that light appeared, they stirred again. Not in anger, in fear. I felt it ripple through the warp, unease, a tremor in the endless storm. Even the demons fell quiet. The currents shifted, pulling me toward the glow like a tide that could not be resisted. I followed. Of course I did. The vigil of damnation groaned as I pushed it deeper into the golden radiance. My ship's instruments went blind. The warp around me twisted, shimmering with colors that belonged to memory rather than reality. Shapes moved through the haze, shadows of things long dead, imperial fleets, banners of the legions, the silhouette of the palace itself gleaming against a burning sun. Then I heard the voice. You remember my name. It wasn't sound. It was presence. A pressure that filled the mind, bending every thought toward reverence. I fell to my knees before I realized I had moved. My armor groaned, my lungs burned, and still I bowed. The Emperor, I whispered. A title, a lie, a memory. The light grew brighter. It was blinding now, but I couldn't turn away. Shapes began to form within it, a figure, vast and radiant, seated upon a throne of machinery and flame. I could see the wounds that never healed, the ruin that passed for divinity. The image burned into my vision, and yet, it wasn't him. Not truly. It was his shadow. The echo of what he had been. The will that refused to die. Why do you still wander? The shadow asked. Your brothers have long since been forgotten. Your name means nothing. Your gods will not take you back. Why persist? Because persistence was all that was left. Because even damnation had to believe in something. I don't know, I said. Maybe because I can't stop. The shadow leaned forward. Or perhaps the light simply grew closer. Then you are more human than you remember. Those words broke something inside me. I wanted to scream, to curse, to fall upon my knees again, not in worship, but in rage. You call me human? I spat. Look at me. I am a monster. I have killed worlds. I have slaughtered brothers. I have carried the banner of false gods across the stars. Humanity left me behind long ago. Humanity, the shadow said, is not virtue. It is endurance. Pain. The refusal to vanish even when you deserve to. You call yourself damned, but damnation is nothing more than eternity without understanding. The words sank deep, like knives twisting through memory. You abandoned us, I said. You left us to die in your name. You watched us burn and called it faith. The light dimmed slightly, as if in sorrow. I did not abandon you. You left because you could not bear to be less than divine. I left because I wanted freedom. And did you find it? The question echoed, bouncing through the hollow spaces of my mind. Freedom. I had fought for it, killed for it, drowned in it. And now, after 10,000 years, I had nothing left but the silence it brought. "No," I said at last. "I found only myself." The light rippled. Not anger, not pity. Something else. Something like understanding. Then perhaps that is all that was ever meant to be found. For a moment I felt warmth, real warmth, spread through the void. Not the consuming fire of the warp, but the fragile heat of life. My armor cracked under it, the metal hissing where it touched my skin. For the first time since my fall, I felt my heart beating. And then the shadow spoke again, its voice soft enough to shatter worlds. "You cannot return to me. You cannot die for me. But you can remember me." "What good is memory?" I asked. "It changes nothing. It changes you." The light began to fade. The warp around me shifted, folding back upon itself. The currents returned. The gods whispered again. Furious, jealous, wounded, their voices clawed at my mind, promising agony for daring to listen. "They will hunt you now," the shadow said. "They fear what remembers me." Why? Because I never stopped remembering you, and then the light was gone. The ship drifted through the void, systems rebooting one by one. My vision cleared. The warp was loud again, storms screaming, demons howling, the laughter of gods gnawing at the edges of thought. But something had changed. The silence within me had shape now. It was faith. Not in the Emperor as God, not in the Imperium as salvation, but in the idea that somewhere, buried beneath all this ruin, there was still meaning. That maybe we were more than the tools of divine appetite. I looked down at my hands, warped, cracked, fused to my armor, and saw faint gold glimmer beneath the grime. The light hadn't left me entirely. It pulsed, slow and steady, like a dying ember refusing to fade. The gods screamed in my skull, demanding that I cast it out. I didn't. I let it burn. As the vigil turned back into the warp, I saw the faint silhouette of Terra in the distance, not the real world, but the memory of it. A phantom carried in the blood of every son who ever swore his oath beneath its skies. The Emperor's shadow lingered behind my eyes long after the light faded. Not as a promise, not as forgiveness, but as a question. Could damnation itself still serve purpose? I don't know. But I will find out, because if the Emperor still remembers me, then I am not yet lost. There are no endings in the warp. Only pauses. Only the brief illusion of silence before the next scream begins. Mortals die, empires fall, stars collapse. But for us, the cursed, the unending, the broken, there is no final breath, no release. We do not die. We persist. And persistence, I have learned, is not triumph. It is decay stretched across eternity. The gods no longer speak to me as they once did. Their whispers have dulled into distant echoes, like storms raging beyond the horizon of hearing. Perhaps they have grown tired of my defiance, or perhaps I have grown too hollow for them to feed upon. The hunger goes both ways, after all. The ember the Emperor left within me still burns, faint, stubborn, indestructible. It is not salvation, it is a reminder, a wound that refuses to heal. The more I resist the gods, the more they remind me that I am theirs. They send dreams now, visions crafted from memory and guilt. In one, I stand again upon Istvan's black sands, watching brothers tear one another apart in the name of glory. In another, I see Terra as it was, the sky on fire, the walls shaking beneath the thunder of betrayal. And in the last, I see the Emperor's face, not radiant, not divine, but weary. His eyes are not those of a god. They are the eyes of a father who can no longer bear to watch his children kill each other. When I wake, my armor is slick with oil and blood that is not my own. The ship hums softly, guiding itself through the currents of the eye. It knows where I'm going, even if I don't. Perhaps it has become more than a machine. Perhaps it remembers what I've forgotten. The warp outside shimmers with color, not the hateful crimson of chaos, but a deep, pale gold. A light that breathes rather than burns. I should be afraid. I'm not. Maybe that's the final stage of damnation. Not despair, but apathy. When even the threat of gods can't move you, you finally become what they wanted all along. Empty enough to be useful. But I am not empty. Not yet. I found another world. Nameless, unmarked, lost to every map. Its atmosphere was breathable. Its soil was black glass. When I walked upon it, the ground sang beneath my boots, faint, metallic, alive. The sky above was filled with stars I did not recognize, all flickering in rhythm, as if sharing a single heartbeat. There were ruins here, imperial, ancient, the remains of a chapel half buried in ash. Inside, the walls were lined with icons of saints whose faces had melted into anonymity. But at the altar's center stood a statue of the emperor. Not the god king, not the corpse, but a soldier. A man. His sword was broken, his eyes were carved hollow. And yet, there was something beautiful in that imperfection. I sat before it for a long time, listening to the wind move through the ruin. Once long ago I would have prayed. Now I only spoke. I don't know if you can hear me. I don't even know if you care. But I've seen what your gods have made of this galaxy. I've seen what you've become, what we've become. Maybe you were right. Maybe humanity was never ready to rule itself. Maybe we needed you more than you ever needed us. The words felt strange. Not blasphemous. Honest. I've lived too long, I said. I've seen too much. I've forgotten what it means to be human. But I remember what it meant to fight for them, to believe they could be better. That was your dream, wasn't it? A dream so vast that it turned into madness. The wind carried my words away. The stars pulsed faintly in response, as though they were listening. If you're still watching, I whispered, then let this be my last sin. I forgive you. Something moved behind me. When I turned, I saw shapes in the doorway. Human shapes. Soldiers in scavenged armor, faces scarred and pale. They carried no banners, no symbols of allegiance. Their leader, an old woman with half her face augmetic, stared at me in awe and fear. You, she said. You're one of them. Her voice trembled. She didn't mean the Imperium. She meant us. The fallen. I didn't answer. Why are you here? She asked. I looked back at the statue. Because even monsters need to remember why they were made. She studied me for a long time, then lowered her weapon. The others said your kind were gone, lost to madness. They're not wrong. And you? Are you mad too? I smiled beneath my helm. Maybe. But madness has a strange way of keeping you alive. She hesitated. What do you want? I want to end. The words surprised even me. They didn't mean death. Death had no power here. They meant completion. The kind of ending that feels like a truth rather than an absence. She nodded slowly. Then you'll find no ending here. Only people trying to survive. Survival. The one faith that never dies. Before dawn, I left. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't look back. Some part of me knew they'd tell stories of the encounter. That they'd call me a ghost, or a saint, or a curse. It didn't matter. They would remember me as something human, and that was enough. Back aboard my ship, I watched the world shrink into the void. The stars flared brighter than before, whispering in a language I could almost understand. For a fleeting instant, I saw the Emperor's shadow again, not in judgment, but in silence, watching, waiting. The gods screamed in the distance, faint, desperate, hungry. But I no longer feared them. They needed us more than we ever needed them. Without our devotion, without our pain, they were nothing but echoes. And perhaps, in time, they would starve. As the warp opened before me, I spoke my last words into the dark. If there is no end, then I will become one. The ship trembled as the engines flared, burning brighter than they ever had. The stars outside aligned, golden light spilling through the cracks of reality. The warp recoiled, howling, as something ancient and quiet stirred in its depths. Not a god, not a demon, but remembrance itself. Maybe it was the Emperor. Maybe it was humanity. Maybe it was both. The light grew until there was nothing else. No pain. No fear. No hunger. Just the warmth of something I had forgotten 10,000 years ago. Peace. And in that final eternal moment before the void closed again, I understood. The end never comes because it doesn't need to. It already lives within us, in the part that refuses to kneel, the part that keeps fighting even when the war is long lost. We are the damned, the forgotten, the eternal. But even in damnation, something human still burns, and that is enough.